Welcome to Apprentice Time with Bonsai. Today, we're going to be pruning some nursery stock Chinese elms. Now, we're not going to be styling them. Really, we want to try and save as many options as we can for whoever does style these down the road. No, what we're going to be doing is trying to compact the foliage. You'll see that they're pretty wild at the moment. Now, I do want to be very clear that these are not my trees, so I'm not styling them today. The goal is to give them a nice hard prune and clean out some of that weaker or undesirable growth so that when it does push again, it's setting up some good options for whoever ultimately does style these trees down the road. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we get started, I just wanted you to be able to have an appreciation for the scale of this first tree we'll be working on today, because it's been allowed to get pretty unruly and wild. In fact, really the trunk line that we should be considering is somewhere right in here. So we're going to start by just setting a new max height, and we'll go from there. Beginning from the nabari, this tree has beautiful thick bark coming up, a solid base, and then 3 branches come off of it. To me, however, my eye says this central one is the continuation of the trunk. I love this branch in the back, but I do think it should be a branch, not the trunk line. So following it, unfortunately, we have these long shoots coming off of it, and none of it's really useful. So if this was shorter, I would be tempted to snip up here. But this is just such a long lead that I think it's useless at its current height. You might be worried that this wouldn't backbud, but it is young enough that I'm pretty confident it will. So I'm going to come to one of these knobs here, just below it, make my cut. Now that that cut has been made, we're going to go ahead and call that the new apex. Following it back to this junction, we have another nice strong lead. So when I start cleaning up a little bit more, I'll clean this, but I'm not really going to mess with this because this is going to be the backup trunk line, just in case this doesn't backbud, which it absolutely should. But that means that down at this junction, we do not need these smaller shoots. So I'm still going to come beneath these little knobs, which look like they're potential budding spots, and just snip. And that's going to give it space to die back. It might bud a little bit, that's okay. That won't be a big problem, but now we don't have to worry about weakening this shoot, these other shoots. Rotating through and looking at this junction, you'll see we have a lot of shoots emerging right through here. I'm just going to keep one of these. So let's start by taking out these weaker ones. Oh, you're a little interesting. Maybe not you. I'm gonna call this one Too Close. And now we just have one shoot emerging right here. And now we're looking here. So this is some crotch growth. Let's go ahead and just nix that. What's going on with these two? Comes out. Now that's a pretty nice one. This feels pretty lackluster, but I'm not going to get rid of the entire thing. In fact, I'm going to try and just shorten it to around this whorl. So I'm going to look at where my foliage is a little more compact, and I'm just closing to some of those interior buds. Okay, so coming off of this whorl is our apex. So now I'm just going to shorten some of these nearby stems and bring them more in line with this. So coming over this way, we have another just long, unassuming stem that's not much good in its current state. But there are some spots where we might get some good back budding. I'm just going to snip it here. A little bit taller than what was previously saying would be our apex right here. But this is where we have some good side branches coming off of. These are going to be some options for just regrowing from. Okay, continuing our aggressive pruning, looking at this one, I'm going to keep these junctions here. That's pretty in line with our theoretical max. So I'm going to come under this one and just... Taking a step back, this tree already feels a lot more manageable to keep working on, but our left side is still pretty overgrown. Let's come to this shoot here, and I'm going to just select one of these upward facing buds, like this one, and I'm going to make my cut beautiful. This one's coming right at us. I'm just gonna pinch that back a little. This also feels pretty wild. I'm just gonna make a snip. Let's call it another snip. But hey, this is pretty overgrown. Snip there. This is another pretty long branch, but I don't have good side branches coming off of this. In fact, these look pretty weak and like they might actually be dead. So I'm going to just shorten the foliage coming off the tips of this and see what that looks like. I'm gonna just start going for it here. And just gonna shorten this one as well. Gonna go bam, 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 bring that haircut in. We're not pruning to 2 because this is really, we're going for back branching, not ramification at this stage of the game. Okay, we're almost done with the first pass here, just 2 more quick snips to make. Looking at the actual structure itself, this is going to be coming from this whorl, and all of that growth is pretty far out. So I'm going to come about here. Now we can keep this whole pad here and think about, do we shorten it more as we keep going? But our final stretch, bringing everything in line with our new apex, is going to be this shoot here. It's another pretty long runner, and it crosses this branch. So I'm actually gonna be pretty bold and just get that out. Moving on to this side branch, we're going to start by removing some of the weak interior growth. Where possible, we're going to try and leave nice pads of foliage, but we're not committed to that. We should be able to get some great back budding off of these branches. Okay, so starting here, just going to nip tips of these. This is growing down, so that's coming out. And I'm not going to fully cut these off because they might bud back now that they've been cut. They're very likely dead, but you never know. In our quest to clean up the silhouette, we're going to be focusing on this junction here next. Now I'm just going to snip some of this weak, undesirable stuff. I'm not sure how well the camera's picking this up, but this is desiccated, so I can look at this and just know that it's not worth trying to save, that this is dead. Okay, now we're going to come to this shoot here. Very likely this is going to get removed down the road, but for today we are keeping options. So I'm just going to snip the tips, clean that up a little bit, make it a little more compact. Get these little dead things. Okay, so moving on to this shoot here, we want to try and keep a lot of this foliage, but if you look, this tree has been hit pretty bad by mites this summer. Later on, we'll come through and pluck any of the foliage that remains that's got this mite damage. Moving on to the pads, we're going to try and just chase the tips and encourage some good back budding. Start with the hard choices first. This nice long shoot, gonna come in just beneath that node, snip that. That's my new defining point, so I'm gonna come here. I like that bud. Keep that bud. Those look good. Moving on to this branch, I think that's a great spot to come back to. Keep that. Oops. And what the hey, that bud really wants to stay, so it can. Now, as I'm getting towards these more interior little side branches, I'm thinking about vigor. This is closer to the tree's apex, so it is going to be a little more vigorous, but ultimately This is going to be pretty weak, so I don't want to do too much to these interior branches. We're going to keep coming through with the scissors, focusing on cleaning up what we can. Right now, I am just going for some obviously dead stuff and trying to chase in some of these existing paths. And that's growing underneath, so that gets cut. Now we're going to just remove some of this dead wood. Watch out, this stuff will go flying. Okay, continuing on, we've got plenty of growth points coming off of this branch, so I'm going to be pretty brave. Just lop that one there. And then we're going to come through and chase these in. Well, that could be nice. Pretty long though. We have this shoot coming off. Hey, take it to there. And then clean up. Feels so much better. Okay, now we're going to come through, remove some of these dead twigs. Going to come over here. Now, those two are fully dead. This one I'm not convinced is, so I'm going to leave a little something, and hopefully that'll back bud. Okay, I'm gonna just keep cleaning up some of this dead stuff. Placement-wise, this is a good branch, but it is pretty long and lanky, so I'm just gonna come pinch it pretty good. Oops, get that out of here. And this shoot back here, I'm just going to pinch the tip off. That might be alive. Okay, so once again we have 3 growth points. So we're going to take out this crotch growth. This one we're going to keep because there's nothing to really fill that spot at the moment. So we're going to come out here, shorten. That still feels pretty long to me. But that's where we're going to leave it. We are going to bring this in. Yeah, that looks good. Keep those as little pads. So pulling this down, I want to make sure the camera can see this. Where I can, I'm going to try and alternate branching. So we've got good bifurcation with these two. Snip that there, shorten this one, and bam. But notice it's not actually alternating. That's okay at this stage. Again, it's where we can. It's not an option here, and that's fine. Don't hold yourself to that rule if it's not going to work. Pruning to an interior shoot. Interior shoot. Snipping that because it's some real weak growth. And then keeping that as kind of a guide, gonna snip there, see there, growing down, and that feels like a good spot. And now that we've cut there, I'm gonna cut there, oops. So we're keeping nice options here, but definitely gonna get some back buds. Okay, so moving on, we're moving into the more interior areas now. So I'm not going to be as bold because this stuff is already more likely to be weak. But we do want to set ourselves up for success. Yeah, that keeps some options. Hopefully we'll get that to back bud. And these are already pretty tight. I don't want to do too much with this branch. I will shorten it though. This is another really vigorous shoot. So I am going to pinch most of these because this can definitely take it. And just the tips on you. Continuing down. It's weak from the mites. Hopefully that'll back bud, but it's okay if it doesn't. Gonna trim that. Get you out of our way. So we're just gonna keep on plucking these damaged leaves. Yeah, so locally, we're doing this at the second half of June, start of July. So that's a good reference point, but I would definitely connect with your local community and find out when people do this sort of work, because there's all sorts of differences. And regional care, just like the timing of how long and short your days are, or when your last freeze is expected to be, will drastically affect your timing on some things. Just because you read a date online, don't assume that it just will automatically work for yours. But if you're open to being a little experimental, it's usually a good place to start, take good notes, and compare back over the next couple years, because ooh, that's a spider. He lives there. I do not. Sorry, spider buddy. I tell you what, you eat the mites and I won't have to mess with you. That sound reasonable to you, guy? Because I know you get a lot more use out of this tree than I do. Poor little buddy. We've absolutely terrified him. Torn apart his little nest. Now he's hurrying and scurrying. It's a shame y'all couldn't see him. It was full epic in my heart. Yeah, so these leaves, if we open it up here, might be able to see these egg sacs where the baby spider mites will be born. But that's why these are all curled over. Yeah, so I know this isn't too exciting, but this is what goes into maintaining a bonsai garden. It's a lot of little tedious work, but you know, it's super rewarding. And I would not want to do anything else. You know, like I love the fact that I am at a place where I can be a bonsai artist, assistant, what have you, and have that be how I get by. You know, I wouldn't say it's a high standard of living, and I'm very lucky to have a partner that's very supportive of me in this. You know, my quality of life, my mental health have gotten so much better since I started really getting into bonsai. So I think some of you watching, if you're curious, you might find it super rewarding to go check out an event put on by your local show or your local club. If you Google like your state bonsai club, bonsai association, something should come up. You know, most of them will put on like a show and everybody will pick a couple of their favorite trees to go set up and appreciate, have them judged and shown against each other. There are all sorts of amazing classes, and I think it's a great way to get out and meet your community. If you're a woman interested in bonsai, you're a little wary of the fact that it might be a male-dominated space, please look into the Purple Pot Society. It's a women's in bonsai group, and you know, I think a lot of my initial experiences were really shaped by interacting with the Purple Pot Society. I found it to be a super welcoming organization focused on making bonsai more approachable to women. Yeah. You know, I actually don't mean to brag here, but last year I won their scholarship at the ABS show here in Denver. Guy whose tree this is, whose place I'm at, you know, I'm an employee, and to him that distinction is important. But I work here, you know, 10 or so plus hours a week in his garden, and sometimes I'm doing stuff like this where I'm doing seasonal work on something he has a lot of that there's just not time for him to get to because he's traveling. He's a professional, but somebody needs to be here to maintain the garden, make sure that things are functioning the way that they should. So that's where I come in, and you know, it's a lot of watering, weeding, landscape work. And then I get really lucky, and suddenly it's time to do this to like 20 elms.